Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Kamma Kuf Gimel. We're going to start on Kuf Beis Amabeis, the second wide line from the bottom. And the Daf Yomi is dedicated for Shmira for all of the Chayalim, Hatzalah for all the Shvuyim, and a Yeshua for all of Am Yisrael. Yesterday we had said in the Daf the position of the Bnei Marava, which argue with Rabbi Yochanan. And the position of the Bnei Marava was that a person who's selling something needs to know to whom they're selling it. Means to say it's not going to be a kinyan unless they know to the person to whom they are conveying the item. Gemara challenges this from a following brisa. Tan Rabbanan halokeach sadeh b'shem chavero. If somebody purchases a field in the name of his friend, we'll see what that means. In kofino solim kor, we don't force him to sell it. See what that means. Bim amalo manaz, but if he says on the condition kofino solim kor, then we do force him to sell it. And this price is difficult to understand. So Rav Sheshes comes along and explains it. My kamar amar Rav Sheshes, Rav Sheshes says this is how we explain it. A person is purchasing a field from his friend, but he's concerned that the people are going to challenge him if he's the one whose name is on the deed. So he writes on the contract that it's being sold to the Reish Galusa so it's protection. Nobody's going to start up with him. Then Ein Kofanos O Reish Galusa Limkor. Then we don't force the Reish Galusa to write him a new contract and say the document was actually sold to this person and not to the Reish Galusa. But if he says on the condition that the Reish Galusa writes this document, then Kofanis Reish Galusa Limkor. Then we do force the Reish Galusa to write the new document. The Gemara says, well, this is very hard to understand. The first Gemara wants to prove that this is a question against Bnei Marava, that if a person writes a document to the Reish Galusa, we don't force the Reish Galusa to write a new document. Miklau, the Mikna Kanyaway. But yet, so even though this guy is writing the document, the seller is writing the document to the Reish Galusa, the document is conveyed to the person who's purchasing it. So doesn't this prove against the Bnei Marava that the guy who's selling it doesn't need to know to whom he is selling it? So isn't this an argument against the Bnei Marava? The Amri we say that the owner of the wheat needs to know whom he's selling it to. Gemara says no. This price in and of itself is not a question. This price in and of itself is not a question against the Reish Galusa. Could go into Oduye Wabal Sadeh Vodiunu Wasahade. No, we're talking about the fact that the person who was purchasing it told the owner of the field, and he told the witnesses what was really going on. He told them, listen, I'm really buying it, I'm just putting the Reish Galusa's name on it. So the Gemara says, well, Ema Seifa, but still, we can, if that's your understanding of the Brisa Rav Sheshes, if that's the case, Almanas, Kofanos or Reish Galusa Limkor, that if he writes on the condition, then we force the Reish Galusa to sell it. But why would we force the Reish Galusa to write a new contract? If he says on the condition that the Reish Galusa writes a new contract, we force the Reish Galusa to write one. But why? Lema Reish Galusa. So why doesn't the Reish Galusa have the right to say, well, you cry, I don't need your respect and I don't need your disrespect. I don't need you to put me on a contract so I'm getting respect, and I don't need your disrespect. Then you make me look like I'm selling all my property off. So Ella Amar Abai says this is how we read the Brisa. A person purchases a field on behalf of his friend, in the name of his friend, and that's how he purchases the field. Then Ein Kofanis Amokar Limkor Zimna Achrisa. We don't force on top of 103A. We don't, under those circumstances, we don't force the seller to sell it a second time. We don't force the seller to sell it a second time. We don't force the seller to write a new contract. That's what it means. We don't say, okay, you sold it to the Rosh Kulisa, you sold it with a fake contract to the Rosh Kulisa, now go back and write it again to this person. We don't force that. Vim Amaro, but if he said to him at the outset, Amanas, on the condition that you do write this new contract to me, then Kofanes and Mocharim Torn. Then we do force the seller to write a new contract to the purchaser. And the Gemara says, let's analyze this. Amaro, okay, I'll sada b'shem Havero and Kofanes and Mocharim Kor. Zimna Achrina, that if he writes a contract to this person, and he buys it in the name of his friend, we don't force the seller to write a new contract. Pshita, obviously he doesn't have to write a new contract. Why would you think he'd have to? The Gemara says, no. He might have thought Matzi Amrway that the purchaser could say to the seller, Made the Yadas Da'ano and Navshai Shakilna. You knew that I was taking it for myself. Ufanchaya Ba'almahu Dikabaina. You knew that I just needed. Rashi says, Panchaya is Hatzoa. You just knew I needed to do this to write in the name of the Reish Kalusa just to save myself from challengers. Vizuze Bechtiru Shadina. You knew I wouldn't just give away money for nothing. But you know that I only did this in order that you would write me a new contract. Hamash Malad, we say that the seller can say that's not necessarily the case. The Amar way, you could say to him, in Yana Abdullah Bahade Hahu Zabantaway Bishmei. I thought maybe you had a side deal with the guy for whom you purchased it in his name. I thought he would be the one to write you a new contract. So you might have thought that he could claim that, but we say no. We say that the seller doesn't have to write a new contract. But if he said, I'm buying this on the condition you write me a new contract, then kofinas and mocharim kor. Then we do require the seller to write a new contract. So pshita, that's obvious. They made that a condition of the sale. Where it says no, that he said to the witnesses, kamedi day, he said to the witnesses in front of him, chazu dishtara achrina kabaina. Now, what was the condition here? He said to the witnesses in front of him, look, that I understand that I'm going to be requiring another contract. You might have thought, that the seller could say, Amina shtara mehayach dekashakalt bishmei ka'amris. I might have, that you could say, I was thinking that you're going to get a contract that you could take from the name of the person whom the contract was written to. That's what I was thinking. That Rash says, Ani ayiti sover. I was thinking Shato Mela Edim, that you're saying to the witnesses, Ba'ina, that I require the nichtov lishtara achrina. Reish Kusa. I was thinking that you were going to say that the Reish Kusa has to write me another contract. So the guy could claim, I wasn't saying that it was the condition that I say, but I was thinking this is the condition that you're going to get from the Reish Kusa. Kamash Malon, no, we say the Amar way that the purchaser can say, that's why I went to the trouble of saying to the witnesses in front of you, that it's from you that I want this contract. So now we have a similar case. Rav Kahana Yav Zuze Akitna. Rav Kahana paid money for some flax, and the way Tosfos explains that the assumption of the Gemara is that he actually fully purchased it. He did the Meshicha, the Mashach Nami. And so now, therefore, this flax is in the house. Let's say Reuben bought the flax, Rav Kahana bought the flax from this person, and the flax is now a deposit in this person's house. So Reuben is holding on to Rav Kahana's flax. But now, it was Sophie Yakar Kidney. So he paid $100 for the kaim, and Rav Kahana left it in this Reuven's house, and now the kaim has gone up in value. So Zabne Marvase the Kitna. So now this person went along and he sold, the guy who was watching the cotton for Rav Kahana went ahead and he sold the cotton. Also Kami de Rav. But now he sold it for more than Rav Kahana had paid for it. Rav Kahana had paid $100. This guy sold the cotton for $200, and now he wants to give the money back to Rav Kahana. He did it a favor. So he was just doing he was a nice guy. He said to Rav Kahana, look, I made you a profit. So now Rav Kahana comes back to Rav. Amalei ma'avid. Ezo eshkel zuze. Can I go take the money? Well, what's the problem with him taking the money? The problem is that it looks like it's interest because he gave him $100 and now he's getting back $200. So it looks like it's interest. So what should I do? Amalei ikazamni amri hai kinna de kahana. So he said, if this person at the time of the sale said to the purchasers that this is the flax of Rav Kahana, then if that was what he said, zil shakel, then you could take the money, because then it's clear the guy was just acting as your agent and selling your money. But if he didn't do that, lo tishkol, then you can't take the money. Why can't you take the money? Because it looks like interest, because nobody else knows exactly what the deal was, and all they see, the rest of the world just sees that Kahana gave you $100 and you're giving him back $200, so that it looks like you're charging him interest. So, Kiman, who is this like? Kibnei Marava. Doesn't this seem to be that Rav is ruling like the Bnei Marava, that we say, how does this person know to whom he's purchasing? Meaning to say, unless the seller knew he was selling it to Rav Kahana, then he was selling it to the guy who was in charge of the deposit, and so it wouldn't have been a sale to Rav Kahana, and so therefore it seems that wouldn't be a valid sale, and therefore you can't give him the money. So is Rav ruling like the Bnei Marava? So the Gemara says, Gemara says, no, that's not, it's clearly not the case. Do you think that that's what's going on here? That Rav Kahana gave 4 and he's taking back 8? This is not a case of interest. He gave him kain, and the kain went up in value. Migzal Gazla. So therefore, since he just gave him the kain and the kain went up in value, we're going to say that the people who took the flax and sold it to the other people, they really had stolen it from Rav Kahana. And Tanan, and so therefore the concern is that they really only have to pay him back from what it was at the time that it was stolen. This is how Rashi reads it. Why do you care who he sold it to? Rav Kahana also we told Mos. Was Rav Kahana come back and take money? Rav Kahana was coming back to take his flax, and wherever the flax was, it was his. And these people that sold it stole it from him, and therefore they're going to pay back all the money at what it was at the time he stole it, and the time that he stole it already gone up in value. So he should really be getting the full price back. So the Gemara explains that Rav responds, Amri, no. No, this was a different scenario. We didn't have the scenario correct. The scenario is as follows. Now Rav gave them the money. Rav gave this person as an amana. What's an amana? Rashi says he gave him the money at the beginning of the year and says, I'm buying the flax at this price. But this guy didn't have the flax yet. So they stipulated a price. And then he says, okay, when the flax comes in, you're going to sell me the flax at $10 a pound. And so now, even if the price of flax went way up, he still has to give it to him at that price. Hold on one second. Just give me 1 second. Somebody's calling me. Okay, so that's what was going on, that this was a case of the Amona. So therefore, he never really had it. And so therefore, Rav Tamei Dama Rav Osin Amana Baperis. He said you can do this concept of an Amana where you basically pay for it in advance And so then even if the price of cotton goes way up, you're still buying more cotton because it doesn't look directly like interest because it's with the produce. But with money, you wouldn't be able to do it. Saying, I'm buying the $10 worth of cotton now, and then instead of giving you back the cotton, and saying I'm buying a pound of cotton now for $10, and then you really can get 2 pounds of cotton for $10, and then the other guy goes and sells it, so he's giving you back the cash. That Rob would not allow because that looks too much like interest. Because the mirse karibis, it looks like interest because he's giving him 2 and he's taking back 4. So therefore, that would not be okay. So if the person said, this is the produce of Rav Kahana, that would be okay. It doesn't look like interest. But if he didn't say that, then you're just giving him back cash, and that would be a problem. So now we're up to the next Mishnah. Hagozo es chavero shava pruta. So if somebody steals from his friend a pruta, let's say a pruta is the smallest amount of money, that counts as something. Vinishbalo, and he swears falsely. Now we have a principle that if somebody steals and swears falsely, he has to pay back the money, plus pay an extra fifth, plus bring a carbon. But in this case, we will learn something else. He even has to take the money all the way until Madai to pay it back. He has no atonement until he returns to the person who was robbed, because it says La Sher Hu Lo. And so this is written by somebody who swears falsely. Lo yitain lo livnov lo shlucho. You cannot give the money back to his son or to his agent, because why? Why shouldn't he give it to his son or to his agent? Because let's say something would happen to them and it wouldn't have gotten to him, then he would still be obligated to return it, because it's not going to be considered returned, so he gives it directly into the hands of the person who took it. But he can give it to an agent of the court. And Rashi says this was a special takana that the rabbis did, because otherwise, if he's going to have to spend all the money to get to Madai just to return the money he stole, they're worried he wasn't going to properly repent. And if the person who was robbed dies, then you pay back his heirs. Let's say he gave him the principal, but he didn't give him the extra fifth. Or let's say the person who was robbed forgave him for the principal, but not for the fifth. Or let's say he forgave him for both, Shava Pruta, with the exception of less than a Shava Pruta of the Keren, then Eno Tzarach Leilech Acharav. Then he doesn't need to go after him, because as long as he pays back the principal, he doesn't need to go after him to return it. Nasan Lo Asa Chomesh, he gave him the fifth, Nasan Lo Asa Keren, but he didn't give him the principal. Then Machalo Ala Chomesh, Machalo Ala Keren, or let's say he forgave him for the Chomesh, but not for the principal, or Machalo Al Zeh, or if he waived the rights for both except the Shava Pruta of the Karen, then in that case he would have to go after him. Nasa was a Karen vinish below al chomesh. Let's say he gave him the principal and then he lied under oath about the 1/5. And under these circumstances, he has to pay another 1/5 on the 1/5 on top of 103b. Until the principal becomes less than a pruta. And the same law applies if he denies under oath about a deposit that he had in his possession. As it states, oba pikadon, oba tzumas yad is the pikadon, or with a loan, a tzumas yad is a loan, oba gezel, or something he stole, or asha kesamiso, or he didn't pay the worker yet, or matzah avedor, if we found the lost object, the chicheshba, and he denies it and he lies under oath, then under these circumstances he has to pay back the Karen, he has to pay the principal, the Chomesh, 1/5, the Asham. He has to bring the carbon Asham. So the Gemara says, Nishbalo in, that if he take an oath, then indeed he has to, if he swore falsely, then indeed he has to travel all the way back to pay him. Below Nishbalo, but if he didn't take the oath, then he doesn't have to follow after him. He doesn't have to actually go all the way to give him the money. He doesn't have to travel to give him the money. So the Gemara says, money, who is our Mishnah like? It's not like Rabbi Tarfon and not like Rabbi Akiva. Well, Rabbi Tarfon or Rabbi Akiva, the Tanya, because we learned in the Brisa, Gazel Echad Michamisha. Now we learned in the Brisa, we had this in Yevamos. If a person steals from 5 people, Veino Yodea Ezeman, he doesn't know from whom he stole. The Ko Echad Omer Osi Gazel. Everyone says he stole from me. Meniach Gazela B'neim. Mistalek. He could just put the theft between them and then leave. Rashi says he doesn't actually have to give it to them. He could just put it in front of him because, and then it's their responsibility to figure out how to take it. So that's the position of Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Akiva says lo zu derech motziasu midei. This is not the way that he could stop from sinning. He has to pay each person back. So who is? Meaning he has to pay all 5 back. So who is our Mishnah like? Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon would say, Afagav deishtava, even if he took an oath, Amar meniach gazela b'neim u'mistalek. Rabbi Tarfon says, even though he took the oath and he swore falsely, that he could just put the thing down and leave. He doesn't have to bring it all the way to them. And Rabbi Akiva, Afagav de lo ishtava. And according to Rabbi Akiva, even though he didn't take the oath, he'd have to pay each person back. So who is our Mishnah like? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva. We want to say that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Akiva. And Rashi explains that our first assumption is to try and support the Mishnah like Rabbi Akiva because the anonymous Mishnahs follow Rabbi Akiva. So our first approach is to say that it's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, when Rabbi Akiva says, that when does Rabbi Akiva say that you're required to pay each person? That's Hecha de Ishtabahu. That's only where you swore falsely. Amar, because it states my time. And what's the reasoning? As it states, what's the my time? And what's the reasoning for Rabbi Akiva that if you swear falsely, that you have to return it? But if you didn't swear falsely, you don't have to go all the way to return it. Damakro Asherhu Lo Yitnenu Biyom Ashmasel. Which means means to say that that you don't fulfill the obligation, that if you swear falsely, that until you put it back into their hands. Whereas Rabbi Tarfon says, even though you swore falsely, Avad Rabbanon Takanta, that you could just put it down and you don't actually have to bring it back to them. The Tanya Rabbi Lazar about Rabbi Tzadok says, Takana Gadola Eskino. The rabbis made a huge takana. They in order to help people repent. And that if the amount you spent was greater to travel was greater than the principal. You could just pay the court, who may be Ashimo, and bring your carbon, so that Rabbi Tarfon said the rabbis made takana, even in case where you took an oath, that you don't have to bring it all the way to return it. Rabbi Kiva would say, when did the rabbis say you make a takana? When you know to whom you stole from. The Kamahadar Mamona where then the money is going to actually get back to him. But if you stole one from 5 and you don't know who you stole from, you're not returning the money. Then the rabbis didn't make the takana. So he challenges this approach. At first, we're saying that this mission is like Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva is saying in a case where you took the oath. So that's our first approach. That where you took an oath falsely, then you have to pay to each one. So Rav Huna Bar Yehuda challenges this. Amar B'Shem Elazar, V'nechku Rabbi Tarfon Rabbi Akiva al shalakach echa michamisha ve'ino yodea me'ezeh me'en lakach. He says Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva are not arguing about a case where he bought it from somebody and he doesn't know from whom he bought. There, everybody would say you could put the money down and leave, that you don't need to give it to them. Where are they arguing about? Where you stole it and you don't know from whom you stole it. Rabbi Tarfon says, Rabbi Tarfon says, put it down and leave. Rabbi Kiva says, that you need to pay each one. And if you say that they're arguing about a case where he actually took an oath and swore falsely, Mali lakach, mali gazel. Well, what do we care if he bought it or if he stole it? Doesn't matter if he took the oath falsely. Vod masiv Rava, and then furthermore, Rava challenges from an incident with a chassid, ma'asav chassid echad, with a pious man. Shalakach mishnei bnei adam. He bought it from two people. He didn't know from whom he bought it. He came to Rabbi Tarfon. He said, Hanach Rabbi Tarfon says, just put the money between them, and you're done. Rabbi Kiva, he says, Rabbi Kiva says, even in this case where you bought it, you need to pay each person. If you want to say he swore falsely, the pious person is not going to swear falsely. That he swore falsely and then he became a pious. He says, I wasn't pious, but now I am. No, that can't be. Or Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, or Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi, Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi, Chasidim, the Meikara. Both of these possibilities, Rabbi Yehuda ben Baba, Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi, were pious people from the beginning. And clearly they didn't swear falsely. So the case can't be talking about where they swore falsely. El Olam Rabbi Tarfon. So it must be it's Rabbi Tarfon. Umodu Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Tarfon is the author of our Mishnah. Rabbi Tarfon would admit that Echad Ishtaba, in a case where you swore falsely, that you would have to travel all the way to give it back to each of them. That Rabbi Tarfon would admit. So that's what we're saying. So our Mishnah is Rabbi Tarfon, who says that in a case where you swore falsely, you would have to return to each and every single one, and even to Madai. My time. And what's the reasoning of Rabbi Tarfon? Because the Amakro Asher Hu Lo Yidneno Biyom Ashmaso. It says they need to give it back based upon the pasuk. Rabbi Akiva would say, Afagav do Mishtaba Kanis. Rabbi Akiva would say, even if you didn't swear falsely, we're going to penalize you and make you travel all the way and give it back to each one. So Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva are arguing about a case where you didn't swear falsely. That there, Rabbi Tarfon says, just put it down. Rabbi Akiva says you still have to give it to each of them. And Rabbi Akiva penalizes you in that case. But if you swear falsely, everybody would say at this point, they have to pay each one. And our Mishnah is talking about a case of Rabbi Tarfon in this case. So let's stop here because the Gemara is going to challenge us, but we'll pick this up, God willing, after davening, and also